VGB proposes 8 strategic fields of action to implement the future energy system. Renewables should be used as efficiently and sustainably as possible. Flexibility of the energy system is required. Because wind and solar energy are variable, it is mainly provided by dispatchable generation and energy storage. Day or night, city or village, summer or winter, energy needs to be available at any time and anywhere. Sector coupling brings renewable energy into industry, transport and other sectors of society. Energy is a lifeline of society. An affordable energy supply is essential for its functioning. Far-reaching investment decisions need a stable and reliable framework. Digital technologies enable an integrated and efficient energy system. Grid connection, 5G or water supply. Energy plants require modern infrastructure. VGB proposes 8 strategic fields of action to implement the future energy system. Renewables should be used as efficiently and sustainably as possible. Flexibility of the energy system is required. Because wind and solar energy are variable, it is mainly provided by dispatchable generation and energy storage. Day or night, city or village, summer or winter, energy needs to be available at any time and anywhere.
Good morning from Essen, dear viewers. A very warm welcome to today's online event at the VGB. My name is Julia Modenbach and I'm delighted to guide you today through the program. Please allow me at the beginning a housekeeping remark. Today at this event we will be speaking mostly German, but there will be a continuous English simultaneous translation. So if you prefer to listen to us in English, please switch to the English audio channel. You all know, dear viewers, 2020 has so far been a very special year for quite an unpleasant reason. For VGB, 2020, however, is a very special year for a very fantastic reason. VGB is celebrating its 100th birthday, which hardly any other association can celebrate. Congratulations. It would be more than appropriate if this fantastic event could be celebrated together in person, together with all of you in a major event at the VGB campus. But 2020 required a lot of patience and creativity of all of us. And therefore the colleagues at VGB quickly agreed what to be done with this 100th anniversary. The party must take place. It takes place in the virtual space. So let us create a little bit of atmosphere, take a snack from our virtual buffet, or maybe you better go to your kitchen, take a cold drink, and then welcome with me together the first speaker of today, the chairman of the board of VGB PowerTech, Mr. Georgios Stamatelopoulos. Thank you, Mrs. Modenbach, for the invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not far away from being grateful to the Corona situation. Over the past years, we had around 300 events, around 500 participants registered electronically. It's great to see how a crisis can be turned into an opportunity. We at VGB see this event as an opportunity. The association is celebrating its 100th anniversary. Due to Corona, the party part of this event can then take place in 2021. Today, we just take a look back at what we achieved over the past 100 years and take a look at what is ahead of us. The retrospective will be presented by me alone, and the outlook will be given by Simone Peter, Rolf Martin Schmitz, and David Bryson will give us their views of the energy system of the future, and afterwards we can all discuss what we heard, what we will hear this morning. At this point, I would like to thank the mayor of the energy city of Essen, Herr Thomas Kufen, who supports today's event. So, this year I also celebrated my 50th anniversary, so I would believe that 100 years is very long. But these 100 years were not boring. In response to an awful accident with many deaths in 1920, the association was established in order to develop technical expertise and to ensure a safe supply of electricity and heat. Later, the equally important of protecting resources and creating energy efficiency were added. In all these areas, VGB and the member companies have gone great lengths. When it comes to industrial safety, the industry improved continuously. Accidents with damage to persons and the environment during the construction and operating phase of energy plants are quite rare. More importantly, VGB contributed towards developing processes and methods that make the operation of these plants safe. The reliability of electricity supply is at a very high level. On average, 17 minutes of power outages in Germany is a record value worldwide. And this should not be forgotten in this year, in difficult times where the pandemic sends most of us to working from home, where the supply security was maintained. When it comes to protecting the environment, please remember that our industry has already reached the climate targets in 2019 already, and this was due to two major qualitative features. With 40% reductions, we had a very ambitious goal compared to the overall goal of 30% reduction for the other industries, transport industry, buildings and agriculture. And our achievement of goals was very continuous. It was not a singular effect, just like the German reunification. It was the result of a change in the industry. When it comes to economic efficiency, there are many examples, including process automation that reduced electricity generating costs. Today, I would like to give you two examples from the field of renewable energy. The solar park Weser in Brandenburg, with a power of more than 180 megawatts peak, is currently in its construction phase. And the offshore wind farm Hittenlands in the North Sea, with a power of 900 megawatts in the last project development phase, and which is facing investment decision now. What both have in common is that they do not need subsidies. There is no better proof for the cost reductions that have been achieved, but it's no coincidence that a member company of VGB made these investments. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the journey so far was interesting, and we have learned a lot, and we have been knowing this since school days. Some of us learn faster, others take more time, but today we can say that the entire industry has understood the disruptive effect of renewables and that the industry has adapted. The engineers which visit our many plants and who will digitalize our systems will be needed. The technicians who can develop and ensure the technical availability of these plants will be needed. And the association with its standardization methodology and its neutrality among members will also be needed. And there are also issues which we cannot manage alone. As VGB, we identified 8 fields of actions which we consider to be essential for the success of the energy transition. I just mentioned them as key words, and I hope we will be able to discuss them in more detail. First, further massive development of renewables. By now, everybody has understood that without this development, it will not be possible to achieve the climate goals. And so the course must be prepared better for the further development through the new renewable energies, strengthening the flexibility of the energy system, the provision of controllable, disposable power. Only volatile generation will not be enough. Third is nationwide digitalization, so that the many plants of the future energy system can be put to optimum use. Our homework in this field is what we are currently doing. Our member companies and the association as well. For example, VGB today launches a new tool. The My VGB will be supplemented by a common digital working platform for all the members at VGB and the member companies. All these 8 points can be summarized in a single sentence. We need more understanding of technology and the interaction between politics, society, and industry. And if we have this, then the current framework conditions will automatically lead us to these 8 points, which VGB stresses. VGB will also in the future support the development of an understanding of the technology of the energy industry for the coming years. I cannot talk about the next 100 years, but I'm optimistic for the next years for our industry, because every discussion of the future begins and ends with the growing role of electricity in all fields of life. And electricity is something we can do better than most of us. This is the motivating message, but it's also a fact that we have a lot to do, and there will be a lot of work and effort ahead of us. I wish all of us an interesting event. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Mr. Stamatelopoulos, for your opening comments. Dear viewers, we're here broadcasting live from the Energy Campus that is based in one of the most beautiful areas of the city of Essen, namely in the Dalbach Valley between Kupferdreh and Dildorf. Together with the power plant school and the nuclear power plant simulator company, VGB here forms the so-called Energy Campus in the Dalbach Valley, the Dalbachtal, where the heart of the association is beating in Essen, the energy capital of Germany. I'm therefore very much looking forward to having a very VIP congratulator here in Dalbach, namely the Lord Mayor of Essen, Mr. Thomas Kufen. He's using the opportunity to congratulate VGB on the 100-year anniversary. Therefore, let me very warmly welcome the Lord Mayor of Essen, Thomas Kufen, for him to extend us his congratulations. So, welcome, Mr. Kufen. My warmest thanks. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here. And greetings to all guests and also the online guests listening in. So it's a proud anniversary, 100 years VGB PowerTech EV. And I think this anniversary is also a good reason to celebrate. This year it's certainly different, the celebration, than it was planned for. The corona pandemic has forced us to go to other formats, but it's all the more important for us to learn how to live with the virus and still don't forget our party mood. I'm very relieved that, subject to the strong, stringent hygiene measures, we still have the chance to come together, not physically, but still digitally. This is why I very warmly welcome, in my capacity as Essen Lord Mayor, everyone here and express my congratulations on your anniversary. Yes, Essen is the powerhouse of Europe. It's here where the control room of the German energy industry resides, and one might even say of the European energy business. Major decisions are being prepared and made here, no matter whether it comes to energy generation, distribution, management, or, like in your case, training, education and preparation. Many key players of the European market are traditionally based here, whether this is RWE AG, E.ON SE or Evonik AG, as well as STEAG GmbH. They're all based here, national and internationally important players. Increasingly, however, also renewable energies have come to play a very important role. So the Essen energy business is not just focused on many big ones, but also today many small and medium-sized businesses that are very innovative and have worked in this way over the past years. So Essen has a few things to offer. And what the picture is completed by is our Fair Energy and Water, one of the key trade fairs in the field of renewable energies and water. All research and development results, future market developments of energies, can there be viewed in practice and with many experts presenting them. The global players of the international energy business meet here, and Essen is concentrating on entrepreneurial as well as technical innovations and decisions and know-how of the energy business in a very limited space in our city of Essen. So this conglomerate of skills is exemplified and supported by VGB PowerTech. So a strong tradition that we've got here, 100 years. This also means 100 years of skills in the process of change. Today, the conversation about energy and energy efficiency is totally different from what it used to be in the past 100 years. And in the next few years to come, we will again have to turn to new topics. So 100 years, this also means to survive in the process of change, to remain true to oneself, to be successful in the market, and still face up to new challenges all the time. Who can say that about oneself over 100 years? So a big compliment and my warmest congratulations. In your work, you can use the support of a broad network of international supporters, friends. And I think this is what the particular value of VGB Tech resides in. So with this campus in Dalbachtal, you have created an outstanding platform for exchange and also for the development of technologies and also the work in practice. So innovation and know-how is one topic, but also close coupling to the decision makers is key, and also to the inventors. So that's what we've got here. And this is why I assume that we are looking forward to many more successful years. So my warmest congratulations. And I would like to extend these to you as Lord Mayor of Essen.
Thank you very much for your congratulations for the 100th anniversary of VGB PowerTech. Tradition and innovation. This usually rules out each other, doesn't it? But it doesn't do so at the VGB. At the VGB, The VGB is innovative by tradition. For more than 100 years, the members of VGB have been driving innovation in the energy sector. The members invent, improve, develop, and the best innovations, and this is also a good tradition at VGB, are honored every year with the VGB Innovation Award. Now I am very excited to see who this year's laureates are, and you will soon tell us. Thank you. I now come to a part of the event which is very important to me. These are the award for special achievements in the field of generation and storage of electricity and heat. These awards mainly focus on innovative and trailblazing ideas of young talent, so of committed employees who are at the beginning of their careers, and we all know how important this support for young talent is also for our industry in view of the demographic change and in view of the competitive situation on the labor market. The VGB and the VGB Research Foundation have been very active for years. Since 1981, every year the VGB Innovation Award is awarded. So it is the 40th time today, but for the first time we do it in a digital way. Laureates of this year are connected by video, and first of all I would like to introduce Dr. Florian Möllenbrock. Herr Möllenbrock. Well, this is normal with these online events. Maybe the line to the Czech Republic is easier than the line to Essen, but I already hear him. Maybe we go on digitally and give the award even though he is not connected. VGB Research Foundation awards to Herr Möllenbrock the VGB Innovation Award 2020 in the category of future-orientated for his outstanding work in the flexibilization in methanol synthesis. This is a classic power-to-X concept. Dr. Möllenbrock studied mechanical engineering at Ruhr University Bochum and did his doctorate at Duisburg Essen University. Gas-fired power plants are very well suited for compensating volatile residual powers in the energy system. He worked on additional integration of a power-to-X plant by the example of methanol. With the simulation software program, why professional? He's modeled the gas and steam power plant for modeling the methanol synthesis with another tool. On this basis, the power-to-X plant was integrated and assessed in both dynamic and static load. This work contributes essentially to the flexibilization of power plant operation. The concept increases the information in the field of storage and generation. In this way, we can also see your face now. Congratulations from Essen. The certificate and certainly, also importantly, the prize money of 5,000 euros will be sent to you. We will do so, by the way, not in a digital and virtual way. This happens by post. Now let's try to connect to the second laureate, which leads us out of Germany to the Czech Republic with Mr. Martin Skala. So if he is connected now, then I would like to say that VGB Research Foundation awards to Mr. Scala the VGB Innovation Award 2020 in the application orientation category for his outstanding work in the field of the development and for mercury separation. Martin Scala studied chemistry and chemistry engineering at the University of Chemistry Prague. He used solid sorbents, he examined solid sorbents for mercury separation in order to assess the sorption efficiency. The applied science-based approach enables to assess the influence of sorbents and particles and of the process itself. It is thereby possible to assess different sorbents and to compare them to each other and to adjust their composition in such a way that they are most efficient in their application. The topic of mercury avoidance fits into the higher level aims of VGB to optimize the environmental performance of power plants. Knowledge of the behavior of solid sorbents contributes essentially towards optimizing flue gas cleaning systems. Congratulations from Essen also to you. You will also receive the certificate and the prize money by post. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. You see that our industry still has a lot of innovation potential, and I would like to appeal to you to support this innovation concept and support it by the Research Foundation and to take this home to your companies. This is something that is very important to us and our member companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stamatelopoulos, and my warmest congratulations to the two laureates. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all reunited by our passion for energy topics. We got this demonstrated by these very interesting innovations. So let's get a bit deeper into this matter. You may have noticed that I'm not an engineer, as opposed to most of you. Matter is, of course, the wrong word here. So let us shed some more light on the current challenges of the energy industry, the energy system and energy sector. The first speaker I would therefore like to welcome is the chairman of the management board of RWE, Mr. Rolf Martin Schmitz. A warm welcome to you. Thank you very much. So let's begin. I think everything has been set up. I am here on site, don't need to come in by video. This is why I'm here, which seems to be a big advantage, but the colleagues certainly will be able to handle the tech setup. And my congratulations too to the laureates. So prize money, we can need that always, and I hope it arrives better than the transmission here. Thanks for the invitation from VGB to this 100-year celebration. We are in a very good position here. I can give VGB my congratulations from a company that is even 20 years older. And this occasion could have been celebrated with a big party. I have been in the industry for 35 years and was at many VGB congresses, and I remember very well these huge parties we used to have, and sometimes also a bit formal celebrations, which were quite costly. The long dress for the wife and the smoking for the tailcoat for the engineer, but this was always great fun. So much on 100 years VGB. My congratulations. The Salzburg Festspiele, they also turned 100 years this day. Perhaps we can catch up with a big party next time and act accordingly. So what I would like to discuss with you today is the prerequisites to a successful energy transition on our continent and worldwide. Of course, it would have been nicer to meet in person rather than just virtually, but the health of every individual is, of course, of top priority. Therefore, let's make the best of it. And especially many thanks to the VGB organization team that enabled this virtual event, and the number of participants, that's really impressive. Such a time like the present one is something I have not yet seen, even though I'm at the age of 63. It all affects us in person and also our companies and associations. Worldwide, we have seen the economy slumping at a level we could not have imagined anymore in times of peace. Therefore, it's all the more important that there are many positive starting points to recovery. I believe, for example, that the aid packages for stabilizing the economy in Europe, as announced by the European Commission and the German government, are well thought out and also understandable and comprehensible. What is key, however, is that this money is indeed invested in the future. And here, the energy sector has a central importance. One area where I think investments should go above all is supporting the industry in building a carbon-neutral production system. This would be good for both the European industry and also a milestone for global climate protection. Very independently of Corona, climate protection remains one of the key challenges of our time. The necessity to reduce carbon is more topical than ever. The industry must reduce carbon in such a way that its structure remain intact. Both belongs together, and Corona has not changed anything about that. And I, for myself personally too, can say that I see these changes arrive much faster than I had expected them. Technological development is much faster than we could imagine, and both things do fit together. We just need to make good use of the opportunities. And for our dear old RW, which is now a new RW, I can say we're performing a consistent, at the same time responsible phase-out of the use of coal. We have a clear focus on renewable energies, and we commit to the goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2040. This is the way of our new RWE, leading provider of renewable energies, the second largest provider of electricity from offshore wind energy worldwide. And if you know where RWE comes from, which you do, then you can see that this is quite a courageous change for this company, and especially for our employees. The changeover from fossil fuels to renewable energies has been run in a more consistent way than in really any other company, because we're really doing this at full speed. And for example, our carbon emissions will be reduced by 75% between 2012 and 2030, which is 3/4, and we will be climate neutral up until 2040. This transformation, however, is just one example for how the whole energy sector is changing. People want clean, safe, and affordable electricity. Nothing has changed about that. Renewable energies are now the key to turn this into a reality. And there is definitely good progress that has been made. The renewable energies are booming at global level, and everywhere in the world, investments in solar and wind energy have increased very quickly over years. Driven by innovation, the renewables are getting ever more efficient, ever cheaper, and in many areas of the world they are unbeatable already versus fossil energies. The electricity from renewable energies can be produced at the industrial scale, and it contributes to keeping costs down. In regions with the right conditions, where sun and wind are available, the prices are cheap, unrivaled. Still, decarbonization is a Herculean task for companies and society at the same time. Our industry, our mobility, and even our day-to-day life will have to change, certainly so. This requires a shared effort in Europe, and we should really be in the front line with that. End of last year, the President of the European Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, presented the so-called Green Deal. Her objective, Europe to be the first carbon-neutral continent of the world until 2050. From my perspective, this is a good and correct approach. We just need to see to it that we don't get starved on the way there, but that we create the right prerequisites to get there. She said at that time, this is Europe's man on the moon moment. And it's perhaps this optimism we need to use in approaching that. This is the attitude we need to make real, distinct progress. a climate-neutral Europe does not fall out of the blue skies. Also, governments cannot just decide that. Rather, the policymakers must set the right framework, the right legislation, and set the right incentives for investments in new technologies with which a lot of CO2 can be saved. The Corona Recovery Program of the EU and the Green Deal can become key moments for the energy transformation. It is now important to create the right conditions for the build-out of renewable energies making progress, such that companies also make investments in Europe. And this, in a very elementary way, also includes the right setting for investors. In Brussels, there are therefore intense discussions about the subject of sustainable finance in order to define criteria for sustainable investments in companies. From our perspective, however, it is important that these legislative approaches should take the transformation of companies into account and not just take a look at the status quo, which would mean to look back. The best thing would, of course, be to create a level playing field in Europe everywhere for the build-out of renewable energies in Europe. Unfortunately, this is not foreseeable at the time being, and I don't think this will happen. There are regional differences too in terms of the solar irradiation and wind. This has to be taken into account. Every member state, therefore, has to clean up its own house, first of all, and create a good level playing field for competition. A great opportunity here resides in offshore wind. Nearly the whole industry, however, is worried about the conditions for investments in Germany. The envisaged rules for auctions in the proposed offshore wind legislation, I think the hearing is today. These auction rules are targeted at bids at zero price. And if there are several of these, then one even has to add money to being in the position to build a plant. So this will only work if you bet on rising electricity prices. And rising electricity prices is not what everyone needs. Rather, it's the opposite. And such a bet is dangerous. It comes with the risks and it's expensive. So if this does not happen, rising electricity prices, these plants on which the bets have been placed will have to pay the penalty and then will not be built. The good news, however, is there are models which promote this build-out and are a good solution also economically, namely the model of the so-called two-sided contract for difference, CFDs, a good alternative. This CFD model means that the bidder with its bid sets a price at which it would sell the electricity. If the market price of the electricity falls short of the price offered, it gets the difference paid out. If the market price is above, the plant operator has to transfer the profits. In the UK, for example, more profits from new wind farms are being transferred rather than amounts being paid under these CFDs. This gives everyone involved a reliable framework. This framework works and also excludes over-subsidizing, and this is why also nearly all neighboring countries with comprehensive build-out targets in offshore rely on this model, among others in the UK, France and Poland. Germany should learn from that. Some people do that. The Bundesrat, for example, also has adopted a position in this direction. That is, opening the law for CFDs is consistent. The industry advocates that and will continue to promote that. Also, the amendment of the Renewable Energies Act can contribute to the build-out of renewables in Germany. Very recently, last week, the ministerial draft on the EG amendment was discussed in the public. It delivers the necessary concretization of the build-out paths in order to achieve the 65% target in 2030. Regarding the details, these mostly concern adjustments of the current regulatory framework, and from the perspective of an investor, but also with a view to safe goal achievement, there is a lot of light, but also a lot of shadow. The proposals on the remuneration rules in the event of negative electricity prices will lead to frequent curtailing in new projects. The proposed financial involvement of citizens and municipalities, in contrast, can make a meaningful contribution to the acceptance of wind onshore. It's also good that the site potential for photovoltaics and onshore wind is to be improved. What is positive in particular, with the exemption of the production of green hydrogen from the EEG levy, the first step is to be taken towards implementing the national hydrogen strategy, because hydrogen is an element on which a lot of hope is pinned in the mid and long term to decarbonize the industry. It harbors enormous potential for the energy transition. And by the way, also for RWE. We can deliver the clean electricity that is needed for production. We have got the know-how to ourselves produce green hydrogen. Additionally, we can also put hydrogen into interim storage in our gas humidifiers and make it available. And finally, our own gas-fired power plants will also buy green hydrogen. Also, the European Commission has presented a hydrogen strategy. This was at the right time. The aim of launching the first capacity for hydrogen production in the amount of 6 gigawatt by 2024 in Europe is quite considerable. And up until 2030, this is set to increase to 40 gigawatts. What is also positive is that the European strategy focuses on the entire value chain of hydrogen generation via transport to the demand side, like with the plans of the EU fast realization methods. There are quite some question marks still, namely what legislative setting is planned for the generation of green hydrogen, what incentives there will be for the industry. Overall, however, the development for hydrogen is very positive. The hydrogen technology now needs thrust, like other technologies, whether this was coal, nuclear, or the transition to the renewables very recently. The next step is hydrogen technology, and everywhere it was needed to have some pump priming financing and innovative projects first. We, as RWE, participate in Germany, Netherlands, and Great Britain in hydrogen projects. Ladies and gentlemen, all these are building blocks in this new energy world, but the energy transition will not be decided by individual building blocks, but by the basic attitude with which it is planned and implemented. And I am not a believer in radical demands and ever new prohibitions. This is why the industry and climate protection must belong together. New technologies enable growth in such a way that industry and society can benefit in the same way. This is the formula that really helps the climate. And besides this technical innovation, the interplay between industry and climate protection, what matters in particular is every single person. If we do not achieve acceptance for the fact that a windmill is perhaps just 500 meters away from our house, or that a PV unit is perhaps also built on agricultural land, we will not be able to make the right decision in prioritizing the goals. Not in my backyard is not a solution for the climate turnaround. And this is why all of us are responsible in taking the lead and in doing what is necessary for a successful energy system transformation. And here, a little excursus to Fridays for Future. If these are young people who take to the streets today are young families in 10 years' time and say, I would like to have a windmill in my garden, then we got it right. And I do hope that this will happen. Now, what is needed in summary for a successful energy transformation? The conviction that electricity should be clean and affordable in future, and that the renewable energies are therefore the instrument of choice. Furthermore, political action for appropriate legislation such that the build-out of renewable energies and hydrogen can make progress, the certainty that gas as a bridge over technology for reliable energy supply will also be needed in future, and that gas-fired power plants will in future increasingly be operated with green gas, and the wish to improve the world with new technologies at the same time maintain our prosperity. For that, we need partners. And we've got one such a partner in VGB. We know that. For about 100 years, this association has been instrumental in designing this setting. I myself also had the pleasure to work on the board of VGB for a few years. And an association always also lives on the commitment of its members. And this is why we as RWE like to be in VGB and active on its boards. In conclusion, I would like to wish VGB a prosperous future with many interesting debates, and also VGB will see a major transformation, but is making good progress with that. VGB will also continue to be essential for the whole energy sector. Please continue to support with vigor ideas and energy in our industry, as you have done that for 100 years. And now let's move on with this very exciting meeting and event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Rolf, for your first words here in the list of speakers and for this outlook on a European energy transition and what will be needed for this. Now we already heard some keywords, and I expect the next speaker to add some more keywords and interesting dimensions to these keywords. At least the title of his presentation promises something, because quite atypical for our industry. He's going to talk about colors, the colors green and blue in particular. Green, you guess already, we think of the Green Deal, and blue is the color of his company. Please welcome with me the Chief Operation Officer of Uniper SE, David Bryson.
Guten Tag, Dankeschön.
Yes, thank you. Do you see the presentation now? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, dear gentlemen on the podium. It is an honor to me to celebrate the 100th anniversary of VGB, and it's an honor for me and Uniper to speak on this extraordinary event and to make a contribution. Unfortunately, my German is not so good, and therefore please bear with me that my presentation on Uniper's activities and the discussion will be presented in English. Before, however, I come to this, please let me look back. For many years, we have heard the discussion in the energy sector, which is characterized by the energy policy triangle in English. We call it the trilemma. When VGB was established 100 years ago, it didn't play a role. But I'm firmly convinced that the trend and the development of VGB was strongly characterized and coined by this, that this trilemma means that energy policy and the energy sector must always make a compromise. The three aspects of resource safety, environmental protection, and price are very often conflicting targets. For example, we all would wish that the energy supply, all of the energy supply we have, would be based on green energy. Environmental protection would be significantly improved thereby. But unfortunately, this solution is not affordable, and supply safety would also be at risk because we don't have a solution for days when we do not have enough wind. But we are on a good course towards this goal, and VGB is and will remain an important supporter and advisor for us and for politics. Many engineers and inventors addressed the question in the past how the problems of our energy supply, and therefore also the trilemma of the energy political triangle, can be overcome. The result are, for example, these drawings. Maybe you already recognized it's a perpetuum mobile, unfortunately only on paper. The famous PowerPoint stadium, you know it. The implementation will take some time. And we at Uniper, we are no magicians. But I would like to give you some examples where we try to make our contribution towards environmental protection, supply safety, and affordability. And we are certain that our activities will support the Green Deal. But the Green Deal, of course, also gives us safety. And this is a real win-win situation. And from now on in English.
So who are we? A young energy company. Only 4 years in the making, but with 100 years experience.
Aber wir haben über 100 Jahre Erfahrung.
over 40 countries in which we operate with over 11,000 people and generating with 34 gigawatts of capacity. But more than the power generation, we're a company that is powerful in gas, with gas contracts, gas infrastructure, LNG, ships, regasification and gas storage. And a customer base upon which we're focused in terms of helping them with their energy usage and savings and supporting their engineering activities. And our contribution to the challenge we face really starts with our own business, where we seek to be carbon neutral in our portfolio by 2035. We have master plans to turn our coal plants, which are closing through the Kohleausstiege in the various different countries in Europe, to turn those into new business lines. We seek to make our gas-fired power plants run on green gas and be carbon net zero in their operation. We're pioneers of gas to power and work intensively on hydrogen, where we seek to support the development of the hydrogen economy. And where we can, we use biofuels and biomass in order to reduce the carbon footprint. And where we're left with carbon, we have an innovation team that seeks to use carbon utilization and find new ways of making carbon a product that we can use. But it's not just about Uniper. It's also about our customers and helping them to understand how they can operate in the future. So for example, we're now providing infrastructure light e-mobility charging for electric vehicles. We signed our first contract recently. We're building a chain of LNG heavy goods vehicle fueling stations throughout Europe, which have a massive impact in reducing the emissions from the HGV vehicles that we see on our autobahns. We have long-term partnerships for LNG transportation, which not only help countries move away from coal, but are also going to be, in our view, the basis for a future hydrogen economy as hydrogen is imported into Europe. So many ways in which we're trying to help our customers, but at the same time, we have to keep the lights on. And that is a challenge for all of us in these days. We use hydroelectric power in Sweden and in Germany, and nuclear power in Sweden, and that contributes over 20% of our ability to keep the lights on whilst being low carbon. But actually, it's also the point at which we find the dilemma. So for example, our coal power plant at Datteln 4, which we brought online, faces criticism on one hand and support on another. But the most important point about keeping the lights on is without doubt the colleagues that work in our business, in your businesses too. I'm very proud of the way that our people at our operational sites and our dispatch centres during this coronavirus situation have maintained the security of supply in all of the countries that we operate. It's a credit to their professionalism. And of course, we need to make energy affordable. And that means looking at ourselves and reducing our costs by using operational excellence, finding new ways of doing business. But it also means looking at our customers and helping them become more energy efficient, helping them to reduce their energy usage. And in this way, we can try and tackle the dilemma that we face. And as I indicated earlier, that can only really be done through great teamwork. And sport is always a great analogy. Here I am in Germany, and yet again I find a picture of the 1966 England football team, which keeps popping up every time I do a presentation. I'm very sorry, it shouldn't be there. I'll choose another example. Here we are. There we go, that's more like it. Handball. A great sport. I don't fully understand it yet, but I do enjoy watching it. What has it got? Teams. 2 teams on the court, knowing the rules, competing hard with one another. A governing body with regulations that sets the way that we can play together. Even umpires on the pitch who are doing their bit to ensure the smooth flow of the game. It's in that spirit that we find ourselves working and competing with one another in the energy field. And that's why it's so important for us to be part of organisations like the VGB, because there we can challenge one another, but also engage with one another and talk about the future. But importantly, on the background of this picture, you might just see the stakeholders, the spectators, some of them cheering, some of them booing, always engaged. And actually, that's probably the world that we live in. So our trilemma has become what some people call a quadrilemma. The public watch us, they challenge us, the NGOs engage with us. Often they're our shareholders. We go a long way in our company to speak to people, to understand their concerns. I've invited the NGOs to our leadership meetings on stage, and we debate what we're doing and what they believe that we should do for them. And it's challenging, but it's important to listen. And that happens not just to me, but it happens to everybody in our business, as we're trying to, as we call it, empower this energy evolution. And I'd like to finish with a short video, if I may, that just highlights the challenges that our people face on a daily basis as they try and improve and empower an energy evolution in Europe.
Thousands of young people in the movement called Fridays for Future demanding more determined action against global warming.
All right, Dad, I need to get going.
Me too. I can drop you off.
Are you sure you want to be seen there? We need to limit the rise in global temperature to well below 2 degrees, or else we're screwed.
I agree with you.
But we need to do more about it. I want to secure a future for myself and the next generation.
Sounds a bit like I am the enemy here, but I am not.
Maybe I just wish you'd understand how important it is that we fight for a sustainable future. You know, some might still see us as underdogs, but we're part of the solution.
We want to make energy transition a reality. To achieve that, it takes more than a revolution. It takes an evolution.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bryson. The theory of colors, football, handball, no one could say this is a boring, technical association. In the past few months, we have heard all kinds of news about the corona crisis from all parts of the world. In particular, there are economic slumps worldwide. Whole industries are confronted with going bust. Companies are left by their people. Every day we hear news about aid packages, dismissals, reduced working hours. We have become familiar with that. But one thing in our ever more electrified and global society is needed ever more, namely electricity. Why exactly the renewable energies are a true engine for economic development will be explained by our next speaker. I very warmly welcome the president of the Renewable Energies Association, Mrs. Simone Peter. She's listening in online. Can you hear us, Miss Peter? I can hear you fine, thank you very much. Can you hear me in Essen? And my greetings to everyone in Essen. We can hear you very well. Over to you, Mrs. Peter. Great, one technical question. Can you see the screen and the charts? Let me just ask the tech staff. Miss Peter. Yes? Your PowerPoint presentation should be visible online in a moment. Here we go. Here it is. Thank you. Please begin. I see. Can you also see the charts? Your presentation is also visible. Yes, it is. Great. So let me try to move on here. So once more, relative to what you said at the beginning, now after Corona, it is about cranking up the economy again in the face of the challenges we have with climate and innovation. We, of course, want to drive clean technologies. When you now see the chart with the map of the distribution of the electricity market 2 decades ago, it becomes evident that a few things have changed. Namely, with the opening of the Energy Market and Renewable Energies Act, the citizens have moved into the picture in the energy sector. Especially the electricity sector has been decentralized a lot, also democratized, which is carried by the citizens themselves. This pie chart shows that. I hope you can see it. Mrs. Peter, the tech team is saying you shared your screen, and this is why you need to click on the chart yourself. This is what I'm doing, in fact. And please move on to setting into the full picture. I've already done that. This is strange. Well, then the viewers should also be able to see it. Can you see it now? Yes, the presentation is visible. It's just not the full picture. But I hope it's for the viewers also feasible this way. Well, if I switch between the screens, this does not work. So we need to move on like this. I hope it is visible, nevertheless. Otherwise, we lose too much time, I guess. I put it to full picture, and I'm wondering why it's not working. Well, the tech team is also in parallel projecting your charts. Okay. I see it full screen, and I don't know how to adjust it. I just see it as a full screen. Okay, we're now getting the heads up from the tech team, Ms. Peter. So we've got it. Okay, so let me go back once more. With the energy transition started by the Renewable Energies Act and liberalization of the electricity market, we've seen a decentralization and democratization of the energy supply system that has been unrivaled. The electricity turnaround in particular has been caused by municipalities and citizens taking charge of energy supply themselves, which is demonstrated in this pie chart. We are at over 40% of eco-electricity, which is supported by decentralized generation assets by citizens, farmers, and small businesses. This is, of course, an essential basis for the people broadly supporting the energy system transformation in Germany. We've heard that about in other presentations too. There's always talk about acceptance, what is needed in order to drive the renewable energies. If, however, we see how big the acceptance is of renewables compared with fossil or nuclear energies, then exactly these opportunities want to be used in order to use citizen involvement models, also the involvement of municipalities, and it has been proposed now. And also we need a broad vision in order to move and align our energy transition further. The energy transition is a success story of the German Energiewende. So far in the electricity sector, it has been driven by the EEG, the Renewable Energies Act. We are at the moment, at the end of 2019, at over 40% in terms of gross electricity demand. According to a balance we struck of the first half of 2020, we are even at over 50% in terms of renewables productions, with heat, cooling, and transport, the two lower lines. There it's visible that there still a lot has to be done. Expressed in overall energy demand, it becomes evident that transport, heating, and cooling have a much higher energy demand. So the key focus must now be on switching these sectors over to renewable energies. That is, with sector coupling, and I'll move on to that in a moment, for helping to transform electricity and guide it into other sectors. More than 300,000 jobs have been built up in the renewable sector in Germany. It used to be over 400,000 jobs some years ago, which is due to the fact that the general setting has worsened. The slump in wind energy is dramatic. In photovoltaics, we are not making very good progress after slumps a few years ago. And also in bioenergy, the auctions are mostly not fully used. That is, we need a new political setting in order to crank up this job machine the energy transition has so far been. Also, the investments in renewable energies have, over the past years, since the EEG was launched in 2000, enormous. So here too there has been a stagnation for a few years. That is, the potential for investments in clean technologies, sector coupling technologies, storage, smart grids, smart home, all this to be brought in, that's enormous, and we need some major thrust again. Also in terms of climate protection, the renewable energies have made an effect, because so far through renewable energies so much carbon has been abated as the entire transport sector emits. So climate, job, motor, this is what the energy transition can achieve in Germany if it's well managed. Like I said, we're in the midst of dealing with the sector coupling issue. It's about bringing green energy into the mobility, heating and cooling sectors. The basic prerequisite is this will create a higher electricity demand. If this is not assumed, and the German government currently doesn't do that, then the demands for 2030, 40, 50 are underestimated, and then there will be a lower build-out of renewables than is needed. Unfortunately, as it has just been said, through the slumps in wind energy due to the amendment in 2017, but also a lack of area and approvals in the States, there is a slump in wind energy building. The recovery in PV has been observed, but not at the dimension we need. We're talking about 10,000 megawatts per annum that would have to be installed. With wind, it's about slightly under 5,000, and also with bioenergy, at least stabilization of the values of 2018 would have to be achieved 500 megawatts per annum in order to make further progress and use the whole striking power of renewable energies. So what is needed in Germany? We need a much faster setup of renewable energies. That is, the 65% of renewable energies in the electricity sector set by the German government is needed at least, rather a bit more, in order to achieve these targets. This needs to be put into practice now, and the prospect full decarbonization up until 2015 also needs to be targeted. It's 3 decades, and everyone knows how long our planning investment cycles are. We need a realistic assumption of the gross electricity demand. It's still being underestimated, such that the demands can be quantified for the individual energies. We need effective impetus for heating, cooling and transport sectors, for the decentralized storage and also sector coupling, that is hydrogen or other PowerTech technologies. We need a fair market. We have long been advocating a carbon price that not just maps heating and transport, but also the electricity sector needs reliable prices such that the renewable prices can be marketed better and the phase out of fossils can be accelerated. Also, the citizens must be taken along. This is what I started with, and I now want to conclude with that because it's important to see the citizens as a key to the success of the energy transition. Energy aggregators, participation models must be supported. The Renewables Directive of the EU must be implemented in order to create energy sharing and renewable energy communities, such that the behind-the-meter consumption of renewable energies can be strengthened. Areas and approvals are made available in the states, which is an important point also for wind energy. And last but not least, a climate protection strategy is always also an industry strategy that is at German and international level. The industrial factor of these clean technologies must not be underestimated. Rather, the renewable energies must become the red thread. Build-out must be accelerated. They must be made the means to crank up the business and jobs next few years. Thanks, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Peter, for your presentation, and please bear with us for the technical problems. Life is life, it's always said, and this is a live event. We are live here at the 100th anniversary of VGB in Essen. Now we come to the next program point, and this is the next speaker. We already heard quite a lot about the complex nature of the energy transition and about the fact that emissions do not stop at national borders, and that acceptance is a very important factor also in the energy policy trilemma or quadrilemma, as we heard it. Today we are taking a scientific view at the energy policy and at the challenges for our entire European energy system, and therefore I welcome our next speaker, who is also online here, Manfred Fischedick, scientific manager of the Wuppertal Institut for Environment and Energy. Herr Fischedick, do you hear us? Yes, great, fantastic. Good afternoon and greetings to Essen. And I hope you can hear me as well. Maybe you can even see my presentation. Yes, we can understand you, and we can also see your presentation. That's online. We look forward to hearing from you. Well, great. So thanks again for the opportunity to give you a broader perspective of the transformation challenges of our European energy system and from a scientific perspective, and we will do so. We will certainly also hear trilemma or quadrilemma once again in my presentation. So I switch on and I can. Do you see the second slide now? Do you still hear me? Hello? Do you hear me? We see slide 2, Herr Fischedick. Yes, please continue. I couldn't hear you, so I try again. And I continue. So that looks nice. We see slide number 3. Great. Do you? So I continue. We can connect to the energy policy triangle that already played a role and that can be extended endlessly. And of course, it is about supply safety, it is about ecological factors, and it's also about an issue that was mentioned in all the presentations so far. And this is the social acceptance and the overcoming of what we call the NIMBY effect, so this openness for participation in this transformation process. But I would like to take you a step further and describe further challenges ahead. And here we see in the field of the energy sector that we have to cope with structural change, and these must be designed in a fair manner. And so the juxtaposition is the magic word. So the careful treatment of induced structural changes, intended or unintended, and the early involvement of stakeholders so that this structural change can be proactively supported. And these are the challenges for the energy sector. for the energy system as a whole, and you will find many points where these structural change processes are involved, be it the automotive industry, which we are currently discussing, or whether it's the change to a hydrogen-based steel production or the recycling economy. We always see structural changes, and these must be designed in an equitable and proactive manner. Now, going into further detail, we see what we need now, and this is duplicated, not surprisingly, in some of the aspects that were already mentioned. We need incentives for necessary innovation, dynamic, because in order to achieve the Paris goals, the national European climate protection goals, then an incremental technical improvement will not suffice. We need these breakthrough technologies, and this requires for an innovation dynamic that and investment and capital must be channeled in the right direction. New markets must be developed, and I think this is also important. Market conditions were already mentioned. We come from a world that is strongly fossil-based, and we are taking major steps towards a system that is based on renewable energies, but we do not have the right levers so far. And this is also a very important point, that these rules must be created. The third major item is integration. The fourth aspect, integration aspect, into several layers. On the one hand, in Germany and Europe, we are not on an island, so our politics must be integrated into a so-called multi-layer process. Germany is a part of Europe, and Germany is a federal state with 16 federal states with different perspectives. All this must be integrated into a political package. We need more cooperation between sectors. By the example of hydrogen, for example, this can be explained. The transport sector will need hydrogen, industry will need hydrogen, and the energy sector too will also need hydrogen for peak load gas turbines. And we would be well advised in order to enter into an early dialogue, in order to see where we can support each other and where we can achieve our goals faster together. And we know that climate compatibility must have many technological options as a basis. Many business fields have to be developed. We need a stringent and consistent integration across all the options. This must be system compatible, and we must make sure that there will be any conflict fields. And so a lot remains to be done when it comes to integration. Germany and Europe must find a position in the trans-European energy system. There will be synergy effects, for example, when we talk about hydrogen and synthetic fuel, but there will also be competition. For example, if we think about Australia or Korea, where people are already active. So in the trans-European system, and then the energy transition and greenhouse gas mitigation options must be considered. This cannot be achieved with technological means alone. We must also see which supporting measures are available, and a sustainable lifestyle, sustainable consumption must also make a contribution towards this in order to achieve climate protection. And in summary, this means we have various challenges which we have to handle, and we will have a complex transformation process and a system that we do not know in all the details, and target conflicts which we do not know so far. And this is the task ahead, and this goal must be better understood, and the system must be better understood in order to generate transformation knowledge from this. And from outside, we also have external challenges, for example, just like the current COVID-19 pandemic, which also initially reduced carbon emissions as a positive effect, but we do not know what it will do to public budgets and to investors. And this is also part of the process which we have to be cautiously consider. And this describes factors of the transformation process and the uncertainties and the dynamic developments ahead. So what does it mean for the electricity sector? In summary and simplifying, we can say the electricity sector must have a role to play in this greenhouse gas neutrality process, and it must have some kind of pioneering role. And the sector is already, to a certain extent, a pioneer. Now about the backgrounds. Because I didn't understand the last 2 minutes of the Herr Schmitz technological study. So about the situation where we are in a phase where we are intensively thinking how the climate protection goals can be readjusted in the short and medium term. The EU Commission will revise the current 40% goal and raise it to 50 to 55%. This is a quantum leap at a European level, but many questions that are connected to this are still open. And this means the mechanism between the European emission trading system and the sectors outside the system. What does it mean for the carbon price, and what will be the impact for the different sectors of the economy? This means higher European target for the individual member states. Can Germany continue upholding its 55%, or will we have to go up to 64 to 68%? And the question that always connected if we talk about climate protection, is 55% enough at a European scale in order to achieve the Paris climate protection target, especially if we consider of the 1.5 degree target as the Fridays for Future demand. In this context, the power sector has an important role to play. It must be a pioneer to some extent. It has already done something. Between 2009 and 2010, the emissions of the EU 27 decreased 1/3 compared to 1990, even more than 40%. So we already went in the right direction, and in 2020 we will have another significant decline due to Corona. But it's also clear that due to the framework conditions, we must expect that the electricity sector can go faster towards climate neutrality, faster than expected. For example, if we look at industry and agriculture, and therefore we expect that the electricity sector must be some kind of pioneer towards greenhouse gas neutrality. Scientists always love to look at scenarios, so I brought you several scenarios from other scientists over the past years, scenarios which all show that if we want to achieve greenhouse gas neutrality, then it's only possible if the electricity sector is somewhat a little bit faster than the other sectors. So I would like to give you 3 examples. One scenario is 1.5 tech, as it's called, from the European Commission. In 2018 it was published. Here you see a reduction line of greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 until 2050. The dark line is total emissions. The broken line is what the electricity sector has to contribute in this overall area. And you see, in simplified terms, that the electricity sector must be 10 years faster than the overall system. Taking another scenario of the European Climate Foundation, also from 2018, you see that the target year for greenhouse gas neutrality is identical. It's 2050, but you see that in the interim phase, the decline in the electricity sector is much faster. This is again the broken line. And the third scenario from the International Energy Agency, that's the beyond 2 degrees Celsius scenario, and it has a similar result. You see the electricity sector must be a little bit faster towards greenhouse gas neutrality, and maybe even in 2050 even achieve negative emissions. So these were just 3 of many examples that could show, and they all support the claim that the electricity sector must be faster. And what does it mean? In fact, it means we need faster carbon reductions in the electricity sector, and electricity demand will increase significantly. We just heard about this sector coupling in many sectors. Many sectors will consume more electricity, industry and transport, and this will be the future, and these will be future challenges. And here you see a chart for the three scenarios that in the final energy mix, the electricity share will increase significantly, both directly and indirectly, with around 1/4 to 50 to 60% by 2050. If you take not just the direct but also the indirect shares, for example, attributable to hydrogen. So we have the double challenge that we need to more electricity and at the same time decarbonize faster than the overall energy system can achieve. And this is only possible if the renewable energies are developed quickly and consistently. And once again, figures from these three example scenarios which show that today in 2019 we have around 1/3 of renewables in Europe, and by 2030 we must be between 60 and 65% throughout Europe, and in 2050 we must be between 75 and 90%, and depending on the scenario we will then have either carbon capture and storage or other energies, for example nuclear energy. I could show you the same slides for Europe, for Germany, but I will not do so because this would take too long. And now one important challenge is very crucial for the question as to whether or not the climate protection targets will be achieved and which are the structural requirements. Here we have them in Germany and we have them in Europe. And this is a simplified diagram, the comparison between sweet spots in blue, so areas with lots of renewable energy, and in red, the hotspots. These are the areas where the demand centers focus, where there will be high demand for hydrogen. And it shows very clearly what the situation is. We must create the connections between the centers so that the energy can be transported to where it is needed. And parallel to this, we have the hydrogen question. We already heard about the colors, and this is also one of the big challenges for me for the future, to find a solution to this color issue. Because it goes without saying that in the long term we want to have green hydrogen from renewable energies by electrolysis. And the big question is, will we be fast enough? What are the sources for this green hydrogen? And do we need interim blue hydrogen? Or will we even need systems in the international context where we import less hydrogen, but only products derived from hydrogen and methanol? In Fischer-Tropsch, methanol for the chemical area, for ammonia, or be it for the steel industry, where we have sponge iron. So, sponge iron that is refined in Germany. And this is a major challenge that we are faced with. Finally, let me quickly go through two slides. What are the challenges ahead? And this is a technical challenge. It's an infrastructure challenge. It's a market challenge, a regulatory challenge. We have a stakeholder challenge. How to address the resistance on the part of those who have to change and whose business fields will have to change. We have a policy challenge. We have a social challenge when it comes to creating social acceptance and to achieve participation. And last but not least, we have an innovation challenge. And finally, it's important to say we are in a situation where we have a major challenge ahead, and this will require enormous effort on the part of all of us, both the business and business associations, but also society. And we must do this in order to achieve these goals, and I'm quite optimistic that we will do so.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fischedick, for this scientific perspective of this topic. We ladies and gentlemen, are being asked by you, dear viewers, whether we can make the presentations available. And we checked, yes, the presentations will be made available on the website of VGB in the same way as from next week on you will be able to listen and view the recordings of this meeting. Now we want to use the keynotes given to have a panel discussion together with our speakers and together with you, dear viewers. You may have discovered that already, otherwise you wouldn't have sent that your questions after the presentations. In your streaming window, you've got the opportunity to send questions to us in Essen. We will see these questions on a screen here and we'll also include these questions in our debate. So another warm welcome to all the speakers this day, both online and here in Essen. Here in Essen, we have the necessary distance between us. The online speakers have the digital distance. We these days call this a hybrid meeting setup. So let's get into it. Mr. Stamatelopoulos, I think we got quite a good impression of the profound changes we're lying ahead, and we also heard that everything is accelerating. As the management board of a very old association, you have got rich history to look back. What's your idea of the future of VGB? And what is going to happen? Or is it that during your short period of office, changes have already arrived? Thanks for this question and the opportunity to also talk a bit more about the association. VGB in time recognized that there is a great need for change. However, I also tried to use the last year, together with my colleagues in the head office, to accelerate the development. Before I get into detail, I may say that there is no better proof than today's event. I mean, we have tried to use all the technologies we've got available. Also, all enterprises, all aspects of the energy system to be represented here. And I may also want to say something that the audience may not be aware of. This panel was intended as the keynote speech panel in the VGB Congress. That is, we did not change the content, just the methodology in this hybrid event. So what was it that we specifically did last year? We see that indeed in policy making and also in the society, the key thing is to create an understanding of the technologies. I think the targets are something we have already agreed on. Climate protection is of the priority. We need to change the energy system. Also, we need to see the challenges in the system. And this is why in a white paper, and if I'm correctly informed, this is published today or distributed more broadly. So in this white paper, we identified these 8 action areas, and we are saying this is absolutely necessary for the energy system transformation to be successful. 3 points have already been mentioned by me in my opening speech. And I believe on top of that, there is the subject of security of service, then the subject of economic efficiency, and also sector coupling. This was also a term mentioned in the presentations a few times, and also digitization and creation of the infrastructure. This is also something we need to focus on. And last thing, let me give you an example. Today in Germany, there's a magnitude of about 100 power plants. Partly, the operation is still working by the telephone. The person in the control room is called and is told, please increase your load, or unfortunately, ever more frequently, reduce your load, because the renewables are feeding more into the grid. Such a system with 2 million units participating in the energy system and feeding energy cannot work. And this is why digitization is a must. If we don't make progress here, then the limits and constraints will also apply in other places. Thank you very much for this introduction. We have already received a few congratulations on the 100-year anniversary of VGB, and now we've also heard something about the future of the association. Looking back is, of course, very interesting, but I also want to ask the other 4 speakers now. You just sketched that digitization is one of the major areas you want to dedicate yourselves to. What about the other speakers? What would you wish to see from VGB in future? Ladies first, Mrs. Peter, what would you wish to see from VGB in the next few years? Well, the most important thing has been mentioned. The link between digitization and the energy system transformation, I think, is the key for the future-proof nature of Germany as a place for business. Smart technologies, smart applications are needed, and a focus on clean, climate-friendly technologies. And that must be organized close to the citizens. At the same time, the strong cloud of this business and industry location must be secured in Germany. And I also wish to see the political framework, subject to which the VGB can continue to work for the next 100 years. Thanks, Mrs. Peter. Mr. Fischedick, from the viewpoint of the scientists, what wishes can you express from the VGB? Well, it's not yet Christmas, but still I can express a wish. At first, let me say VGB in the past 10 to 15 years, since I've come to know it, has changed a lot. And the program is totally different than it used to be 10 to 15 years ago. So I would wish to see that VGB over the next few years does become a motor for the energy system transformation, for transition to 100% renewable energy society. A lot of skills are needed here, and the association can add these. And if this is successful in cooperation with the respective enterprises and also with science, then all of us together can take a major leap ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Fischedick. Now there are two representatives of member companies of VGB present here. What would you wish to see from VGB in the next 100 years?
Yeah, maybe if I start. I think it's obvious that as you look at the future, that we, as well as having this political challenge and this societal challenge, we have a huge technical challenge. And for me, the VGB is very well placed to help and support the industry and the sector change and move towards solving the problems that we'll need to solve. The challenge that we face is one that none of us can solve on our own. And so having an organization where you can talk, you can discuss, as I said in my analogy of the competitive field, you can still talk about these technical topics and look to the future, I think is very powerful. And I think the fact that the VGB is now doing that more and more digitally and reaching out to the organizations and spreading beyond the borders of Germany, I think is really important. It has a role to play, I think, not just in Germany, but perhaps in Europe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bryson. Rolf, I know you like to express wishes. What are your wishes on VGB? How do you know that? Well, but we have enough wishes. I would like to see that VGB remains a technical representative of interests. The danger of technical associations is always to slide into lobbying. VGB has not a good chance to do that, and it always goes over if we do that. I can only warn against that. It's important to have a representation of interests, a forum for an exchange. I can only endorse what Mr. Bryson said. Technical innovation must be discussed in this forum. When the politicians hear something from VGB, they must know it has technical reasons, not lobbying reasons, entrepreneurial reasons, no, but clearly technical reasons that should be taken into account. And this, I think, is what the importance of VGB is as a tech association. We are such an association, technical, and we will remain so, I can assure that. Thank you very much. That's great, Mr. Stamatelopoulos. We have already received questions from you, dear viewers, and I'd like to include these in our debate. One of the viewers has asked what challenges and solutions are there for the energy system if the renewables take up an ever-increasing share in energy supply. This is a perfect fit, because I would like to ask the two representatives of companies, Rolf, Mr. Bryson. The two of you in the past months and years have massively restructured your companies, redesigned them, and in particular because the requirements on energy supply have changed so much over the past few years. What made you invest in this transformation of the companies, and what are the next steps? So, the solutions for the energy supply of tomorrow. So the next thing we need is, of course, the ability to store. Today it's the power plants who store their run up and down. The more I need ever more accumulation opportunity to manage that. In 20 years, we will have a system that is not just based on large-scale power plants, but on many decentralized power plants. We have distributed open gas turbines, also accumulators to ensure the security of service if there's no wind and sun. Otherwise, the further build-out, we will have driven digitization by interconnecting the small feeders and also the buyers. The industry can also offer more flexibility. So this is a system that is not boring, but technically it's well manageable. Mr. Bryson.
I mean, first of all, if you look at the markets and you look at our customers, they're demanding a change of us. If you look at our shareholders, actually, they're demanding a change of us. They want to see us move towards a greener world, to move away from being so fossil heavy. So clearly we react to that and we respond to it. But also our people that work for us also want that. They want that in their private lives, they want that in their technical lives, they see the challenge and they aspire to it. So that also drives forward the change. And I think, as you just said, Schmitz, the challenge that we face at the moment with the integration of these technologies, new technologies, older technologies, creates an opportunity for engineers to solve significant challenges and problems. If you look at just the concept of creating grid stability through this change, it's huge and it's important. And so I think when you've got people in your organization who care about such things and have the agility, mental agility to cope with those problems, they're motivated to change. And once that change starts, I don't think you could stop it if you wanted to, because it's a powerful force. And that certainly is what I feel when I come to work. Admittedly, I come to work in my home office nowadays, not meeting people, but when I come to work and I see people on Teams and I talk to people in the power stations and in the engineering departments, they really want to drive that change forward.
Perhaps I can also say something about that. I will try to summarize in a technical way what the gentleman said and what was the question. What is going to happen if the renewables are built out further? In the future system, we will always need dispatchable capacity, and in principle there are three opportunities for that. Number one, fossil fuels, mainly gas. This will certainly play a role, like Mr. Schmitz said, in a transitional phase at least. Then we have storage, accumulators in the sense of either batteries, but also in the sense of pumped storage power plants, which may not play the big role for Germany, but they do for Europe. And the challenge with storage is that it is not sufficient in order to bridge over a fortnight-long period of no sun, no wind. And we have the opportunity to have renewable dispatchable capacity. So these are technologies like biomass, biogas. They are, of course, limited. And also, as we have heard, green gases like hydrogen, that is, generated gases based on renewable energies. These are the opportunities we have, and only this way can we make it. Without dispatchable capacity, our energy system will not have any future. Thank you very much, Mr. Stamatelopoulos. I would like to follow up with a question from a viewer, perhaps also to you, Mrs. Peter, as a representative of the industry. The viewers mainly come from companies working in this industry and also from plant manufacturers. And one colleague says the plant manufacturers, because of Corona, are currently in a deep economic crisis. How is there any possibility of involving the companies in this process of change and implementing that? Mr. Stamatelopoulos, Mrs. Peter, as associates, what can you do?
That is very important that companies and employees be brought out of the crisis. It was clear that the Corona crisis would also impact companies, including the renewables industry. And furthermore, over the past 2 years, we already had problems, especially in the field of wind power, what we always commented about as the VDA, and we had the health crisis, which also impacts us badly. So the focus from our side is that renewables be put in the focus of a program in order to make it clear that investment is needed, especially against a background which the International Energy Agency also emphasized that renewables are in high demand. So demand for fossil capacity, especially coal, declined significantly, whereas renewables are still in high demand, so we need a new push. And also as part of the Renewable Energies Act revision, the question arose as to how to support and accelerate hydropower and wind energy in order to create a new energy market system where the renewable energies, especially wind, are in the focus. Wind energy as an option, disposable loads, hydrogen, other sector coupling technologies must be integrated, and the energy system must be positioned accordingly. This will create many new jobs. It has an enormous innovation potential. We are a country of engineers, technicians, of research institutions, and for many years these proposals have been worked on, and so carbon prices will also have to be used as incentives rather than returning to the old structures, which would futile investments. This would be the framework for pushing ahead and in order to bring also the mechanical engineering industry out of crisis. So what about the VGB's view? From the VGB's views, I could say, and also as a member company and as somebody who worked in the plant construction industry for 13 years and then at the manufacturer end, and I must clearly say the manufacturers, and now I also look towards the manufacturers of conventional equipment. We heard about the renewables, but manufacturers of conventional technology must also adjust. We need flexible plants in the future. We need quick load changes, and this technology will be on demand also in the future. Maybe something what I also think of, I think these problems which we are faced with at present are symptomatic also for the breaks that we took when it came to changing our energy system. And this was described specifically for the offshore area. If no investments are made, then the first who feels this pressure is the one who builds the plants. And therefore, as an association, I would say we must create the framework conditions, especially in Germany, that we can make progress with our system, that we create stable and supportive framework conditions for the energy transition. And this will then also be felt by manufacturers. Thank you. Now, let's take a scientific look again. So, viewer asked us, did the corona pandemic led to economic recession, to economic dips? And the viewer says, and this will continue for some time until we recover from this. And he sees the 2030 climate targets as threatened. Herr Fischedick, you already described some scenarios. What would you say about the political regulatory framework conditions for achieving the 2030 targets and the impact of Corona on this and on the manufacturers and companies who will have to make this come true? Not a simple question. We see that global emissions will decline by 6%, but not on the basis of climate protection goals, but on the basis of something we didn't want. This was the corona pandemic. We have declines in the transport sector and other things. And individual areas must be looked at, especially when it comes to transport. And we must see what we can transfer to the post-corona phase. We must take a closer look. So some of these aspects that were generated from corona must be transferred to the post-corona time, not just in industry. That would be counterproductive, the 2030 targets. At a European level, they are currently discussed. I think they are feasible, and we are now in a completely different situation than before. In the field of renewables, we have a situation that these technologies are competitive. We have major cost leaps downwards, and we are now able that both technologies in steel production or in hydrogen production have made progress. And even in these areas move towards greenhouse gas neutrality. So this can be achieved in the direction of the 2030 targets, but the regulatory conditions are not yet in place in order to achieve this. The first cautious steps have been taken in the economic programs towards climate protection goals, but they will be wasted if we do not persistently pursue this longer. And we have to continue working on this. Take the example of the hydrogen technology, the economic subsidy program in Europe. It was very important at this point in time that these necessary investments are made earlier than planned. And if you then continue making the individual investments for the next steps, and then these initial investments would be in vain. So we have not yet achieved a stage where we must be in order to achieve these targets. So we are not fast enough. Thank you, Herr Fischedick. You just said investments must be made earlier or ahead of schedule, and the regulatory and political framework conditions are not yet in place. If somebody has to invest, then it's the companies. Mr. Bryson and Rolf Schmitz, you just mentioned the Green Deal. Mr. Fischedick, the Green Deal or the regulatory framework in Germany, can they generate the impulses for investments that are made ahead of schedule?
So I think it actually, if you look back at the previous question, for example, where we were describing, the question was about uncertainty. The biggest challenge that we face at the moment, I think, is that in order to create the investment that we need for the change, we need certainty. That's what's absolutely required. So whilst we've got the elements of the Green Deal on the table, which I think are very positive, I think they can help us. What we need is the clarity about the different elements, the different mechanisms, the ETS, the way that will be changed, the border tax, how it will be implemented, the climate ambitions, exactly what are they? And once we can see those different elements of the Green Deal and they create the certainty that we need, then I think we have a chance to guarantee the investments that are needed for the change. But that requires governments and parliaments and the EU to support that and to engage in it. And it's a huge challenge to get that alignment. But I do think even with coronavirus that there is a sense of urgency to try and achieve that from politicians. You can hear it in the way they talk. So I do have my glass is perhaps more half full, and I hope and believe that they will try and achieve something, because this is also a moment of opportunity for change.
Are you equally optimistic? I'm optimistic in that a lot of money is on the table that wouldn't have been generated without this situation. This money must now be used for the transformation, especially for industrial transformation. So one thing is the energy sector, the other one is industry. So if our customers aren't there, it wouldn't help us. Therefore, it's very important that more certainty is created, also with the help of these subsidies and support in order to invest in the right technologies. And yesterday I talked to people from ThyssenKrupp. So changing a steel maker requires investment, and so support will be necessary for this in order to enable it. Mr. Stamatelopoulos, which hopes do you peg to the Green Deal and the political regulation, and what do you know from your member companies about this? So we connect the wish for stability, for stable framework conditions, and a framework for all of Europe. And I think this is also a discussion I refer a little bit to Germany. We tend towards neglecting the other European countries in terms of performance or in terms of flexibility and provision of power. And I think the Green Deal can present such a framework. Thank you. All of you just mentioned new technologies, and our viewers also asked specifically for one new technology. This is hydrogen. And one question concerns the innovation for hydrogen, which are still in their infancy. And the viewers wonder how this can be improved. Maybe Mrs. Peter, you already talked about innovation and new technology. What do you say? How can the future of hydrogen be made safer and more reliable? And how can this be promoted? Hydrogen is the talk of the day, not just in Germany, but also in Europe and at an international scale, because it's an important substance, especially for industrial purposes, steel, cement, chemistry, in order to help to support where direct electrification, for example, with green electricity is not possible. We need large amounts, and therefore we have the hydrogen strategy where we discussed what can be produced nationally and what do we need from international sources. And we all know that we will always need imports, but I think Germany can do a lot when it comes to building technologies, electrolysis capacities in order to ensure the market ramp up, especially at the sites where, for example, excess electricity is available in the north of Germany from wind power units. We already have pilot projects, and these pilot projects then have to be scaled up for electrolysis in order to support this, and we said this several times. We need a revision of the fee. So how can the renewable energies levy be modified, and how can new technologies be incentivized by reducing fees? Not just everything in one step, not reducing it to zero, because somebody must still pay for the renewables. But when it comes to levies, we can give clear incentives in order to trigger off an acceptance discussion at an early stage, because it's clear hydrogen of the future will be green, and this will be the only way in which it will be accepted. So hydrogen from France, from nuclear power plants, this is gray or green, gray hydrogen, and this must also be accepted. So we will need a concept for the development of renewable energies that must be synchronized, and therefore we also need the right framework conditions, and the Renewable Energies Act must be revised accordingly, and we need a complete reorientation of levies in order to bring this forward. Thank you, Mrs. Peter. This brings us once again back to the colors, and especially in the case of hydrogen with its many colors, we are specifically in the field of color. Mr. Bryson, you mentioned the colors as the magenta, violet, dotted, hydrogen, violet, hydrogen, whatever. So what does Uniper rely on? Are you already colorful?
Yeah, I'm very colourful, actually. I think that, yes, in the end, I'm sure that we'll move to a situation where we're using green hydrogen. But we can't get there in one step. The volume of hydrogen that's needed to achieve the change, we've talked about steelworks, the volume of hydrogen needed to operate a steelworks is incredible. So the ability to move straight to a pure green world, I think, is unlikely to happen. Just as, to be honest, it's been impossible to move to a completely renewables world. So the incentives that we put in place, I think, need to be in place that are pragmatic and allow us, as I say, an evolution, not a revolution, because the revolution won't happen. So there will be different colours of hydrogen, I'm sure, on the way through, and we just have to recognise that we are committed to becoming green in the end. The world now, when we talk about hydrogen, we talk about using excess energy, for example, from wind parks. I can imagine a world where we're not using excess capacity from wind parks, we're using wind parks to produce hydrogen. Why? Because the majority of our energy that moves around Europe doesn't move around in electrons, actually it moves around in molecules. That's the way that we're set up. So I think we will have a very fundamental change to the way that we view how we operate, but it won't happen overnight. And so the colours will be there. And in the end, I believe we will be green, but it will take some time and it will take some years, in my view.
You are currently rebuilding RWE to a green company with green hydrogen in pilot plants and technological development. But if I think of green hydrogen, if I think of Germany, then I have to leave Germany. And we will never be able to produce this because we don't have the area that we need for this. And therefore, I can only agree with what the colleague said. And it's no surprise. We will need these transitional technologies, but we must develop, for example, a hydrogen grid. We need technologies for using hydrogen. Electricity must be used wherever it can be used, and if we have something in addition to this, then we can think of hydrogen, because green hydrogen is very energy intensive and expensive, and therefore we should also think about blue and magenta hydrogen. Because if I have the grids, I have to fill them with something. I cannot fill them with green hydrogen if I do not have enough renewables. And to say I use renewables to generate electricity and then I stop at 50%, this would be absolutely nonsense. And among us technicians, we are talking about this, and we should be very cautious.
Mr. Stamatelopoulos, what is the view of the technical associate manager? Well, I want to live up to this capacity. Also, I don't want to be misunderstood that we were trying to put the foot on the brake or show the difficulties. No, it is our responsibility, though, to also point out where the challenges reside. I believe Mr. Schmitz said that regarding the efficiency. Another topic is the water consumption. We need, if I correctly remember, for 1 kilogram hydrogen, we need 10 liters of water. The water must come from somewhere. And also, I have to say, for the energy sector, the share of hydrogen will be very small in comparison with what the industry will use, that is, what is necessary for the decarbonization of industry. And this is important. And another detail, green hydrogen today is, and of course we don't have a major pilot plants like 100 megawatts. Only from that point on would I say, yes, a cost estimate would be meaningful. So today it's much more expensive than blue hydrogen. I want to avoid, that we talk about a panacea, silver bullet that can do everything. So we don't want to get into such a discussion, always hoping that we have found the solution, while with other topics, which are also necessary, put the foot too much on the brake. Well, the panacea or silver bullet. This is, of course, a good cue for Mr. Fischedick. Mr. Fischedick, the scientist in you must jump up when you hear that. The panacea or silver bullet. Can you produce that in Wuppertal? Well, of course, I love silver bullets, but unfortunately I don't have any either. However, let me start with a little anecdote to go back to the subject of efficiency and put it into a somewhat larger context. If we take a look at what we've been doing for 100 years in the automotive industry, this is the top of inefficiency. Very miserable efficiencies. We've been doing that for 100 years. So efficiency needs to be put into perspective, even though I'm of the view of Mr. Schmitz, where I want to say, of course, we have to use energy as efficiently as possible and use electricity directly only where it's not possible to use other options. Another thing I want to raise is, and here I am definitely endorsing what has just been said, we should not commit the mistake to place the focus too much on hydrogen as a future technology. We need efficiency on the demand side and many, many other things more. And we also need hydrogen. Hydrogen today, we are in a different situation than in the past 3 or 4 decades, when we also addressed hydrogen as a top topic. The hydrolyzation units have improved a lot. Technology development has taken place. Also, we know how natural gas pipelines can be converted to hydrogen transportation. Also, steel production is another application, but we are not any further with that today. Today, we need sector coupling in electricity. The need for hydrogen is probably relatively low, at least on the generation side. We may need many units who can produce hydrogen with electricity, but they won't run so long during the year that the volumes are sufficient. In industries, this is totally different. In some areas of transport, this is different. There is where the largest demand for hydrogen is. So the question is, where can it come from, this hydrogen? What else is different than in the previous decades? You basically feel an investment interest of the companies in hydrogen, rather than just going for pilots. Especially, there is also an international movement towards hydrogen. And that leads me to the following point. So there is a greater weight towards hydrogen industries. This is due to the greater dynamism in this field. Also hydrogen-derived energies. And as to blue and turquoise hydrogen, the acceptance of that will be depending on many factors. What quantities, what locations are we talking about? I think it's also important to say, does it really make sense to invest in blue and turquoise hydrogen? Hydrogen, here, that's a question where we need to clarify a few things. Volumes and so on. So this is not in the very near future. Thank you very much, Mr. Fischedick, for the scientific perspective of this topic. We have received many questions on hydrogen, but I think this has already been discussed quite extensively, and this is why I want to also turn to other questions from the viewers. Policymakers and the regulatory framework are another topic you have on your mind, and here the question specifically goes to you, Mr. Stamatelopoulos. How do you and VGB think about a uniform energy policy of the EU states? Also, economic aspects are being addressed, like no competitive drawbacks due to different stringency of the requirements. I think this is mainly geared to plant manufacturers. Would you wish to see something like that? A uniform EU regulation? Yes. Beforehand, we talked about Christmas not yet being there to express wishes. Actually, we do need that. We need European policies. We have a very interconnected network within Europe, and the same legislative setting must be there. Why I stick to saying there must be is the experience of the past years has shown that local country-specific solutions have always been followed. Also, regarding the Green Deal, this is another opportunity to find a joint framework for all countries of the European Union and do that in an adequate way. We, as association, we have members and also very active members from nearly all European countries. We would welcome such a development very much. Thank you. Mrs. Peter, the renewable energies, that's the future. Is this a level playing field across Europe? Would you say so? Yes, definitely. Even though, following up to the previous question, let me say this is often not implemented into practice with the Renewable Energies Directive, the Green Deal Initiative, and very recently the initiative from Mrs. von der Leyen that the EU Commission wants a minus 55% greenhouse gas abatement, which must be even higher to reach our climate targets, that in at the European level, the discussion is sometimes more far-reaching, which is also why the impetus from Europe is coming towards Germany, for example, in the matter of clean energy supply to be resolved faster and more efficiently with the citizens. We have been waiting for a while for this being transposed into German law, but in my presentation, I emphasized what major effect the Renewable Energies Act has had on the expansion of renewable energies at national level. And besides the price reduction, the share of wind and sun is at 50% of the electricity demand today. And of course, also the individual member states should design their policies and have to in such a way that Europe is not putting the brakes to them. So working together is correct and right. The community has set itself shared targets. The community now is working on a shared industry strategy. It develops the core points of the Green Deal for a Climate Protection Act. And here it's important that especially the German government during the EU presidency is taking the lead and says we endorse the most ambitious targets and measures in order to, first of all, become a front runner again, and secondly, also within the European Union, to further promote the energy system transformation. So doing one thing without leaving the other, strengthening Brussels with everything where it works, but also act at the national level in order to support the own industry and take the own demand situation into account in order to promote the energy transition in all sectors. Thank you, Mrs. Peter, for this case for a joint energy policy. Also, we get many questions on the subject of bridge-over technologies. Mr. Bryson addressed that, gas as a bridge. For example, into the future of renewables. Service security is, of course, the big topic. Rolf, I know you as an engineer have a very decided opinion on bridge-over technologies and security of service. One colleague asked the question, do we have a major risk here? Namely that very soon, not just in the long term, namely that we don't have any backup or balancing or imbalance capacity in the system. You are rebuilding RWE into renewables. Where do we get that from? Well, we are not rebuilding RWE into renewables. We've got two segments. There's the area of volatile energy. This is wind and sun, on and offshore and sun, and the non-volatile energy. In part, this is still coal-fired power plants today. It's also gas, it's biomass, it's storage. It can be hydrogen, and it can also be water. So, in this sense, this is the distinction we make. Based on the tech side, we also map that in our company, as you will know. And therefore, what matters is sorry, there's no sound at the moment. The interpreters can't hear the speaker anymore. Sorry, the microphone keeps to be switched off. Mr. Bryson, what about you?
We've seen examples of this already, actually, in Europe. We've seen in the UK where the grid was being run with more than 50% of renewables, and the loss of a wind farm, the loss of a gas asset resulted in it was one of yours. Resulted in instability in the grid, which led to load shedding, problems in the train networks, load shedding in hospitals. So the reality is there is a need for managing, if you like, inertia on the grid and for balancing the grid to deliver the stability as we change. That's clear. I think we shouldn't, though, underestimate the amount of investment that still goes into gas technologies, for example, at the moment, and that does happen. We're certainly investing quite significantly in our current gas assets. We may not be always building new ones, but we're always increasing the efficiency and trying to make our units more flexible, to increase their ramp times, to reduce their minimum loads, so that we can provide the flexibility that's needed exactly at this moment in time. But yes, there is a risk, and actually it's not the responsibility of one company to solve that, it's the responsibility of the system, and that therein lies our challenge. This is an ecosystem almost, and it needs to work together to deliver the stability that's needed.
Thank you. Also, we have received a question which goes to you, Mr. Stamatelopoulos. We just talked about security of service and gas turbines. Perhaps you can add something to this aspect. One of the viewers asked, what role does Nord Stream 2 play, which is reported about in the news media every day, and that with regard to service security. I think I agreed with Mr. Schmitz that we are a technical association, so this is why I will not want to say anything about Nord Stream 2. To give you a serious answer, currently, at the moment, we have enough gas in the market. This is the current situation. There were also times when there was less gas in the market, and this is true too. But at the moment, we do have, via LNG, but also through gas in the pipelines, flooding of the European market with gas. On the topic of gas turbines, open gas turbines, I wanted to say something, because my impression is that this question was coming from a colleague in the manufacturing industry. I believe for us it's also important to develop a gas turbine technology that is also hydrogen compatible, that in future at least partly can be operated with hydrogen, and as far as I know, I don't want to name any companies and manufacturers here, but there are such programs. There are also developments where we can produce with a relatively high share of hydrogen and as a fuel, and this would allow us a gentle transition from gas, the share we need today, to later on to hydrogen.
Maybe I could help Georg out as well, because I probably should partly answer that question, as we're a financial investor in Nord Stream 2. So, I mean, our view is quite clear that the ability of Europe to produce its own gas is declining. You see that in the Netherlands with the Groningen fields, you see it in the North Sea, and there will be a need, even though we're in a situation now, an unusual situation where we have a lot of gas, that we'll need more gas in the coming years in order to deal with this transition. And so having the ability to import via LNG, for example, or having the ability to import via Nord Stream 2, which is already capable of taking 80% hydrogen, so could fit to a new world, is something that gives the security of supply to Europe. And that's why it's important to maintain these different supply chains that come into Europe to ensure that we can still continue to keep the lights on and develop and grow as an industrial economy.
I would like to hear from you what the perspective is. We heard there's enough gas in Europe. There are turbines that can also use hydrogen, not just gas. What is your opinion about these technologies in the future? Frau Peter, I would also like to hear you. What does it do to the future that is renewable? Those who invest in new gas power plants should invest in hydrogen-ready plants that can be changed or switched over. The European greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2015 can be achieved in this way. So more hydrogen must be used. And these assets should be operated for a long period of times, then they must be hydrogen ready. So manufacturer must offer gas turbines that are capable of processing this. This is very important. And regarding Nord Stream 2, a lot has been said about this. The world will not collapse. if it's not built completely, if it's not finished, because we can obtain gas from other sources. So most scenarios predict that demand will not increase, but decline instead. So I do not expect any bottlenecks in supply in the near future. But that's not my decision, and I'm happy that I do not have to make this. Thank you, Mr. Fischedick. Mrs. Peter, what is your perspective regarding the bridge technology of gas? Maybe a half sentence regarding Nord Stream 2. We all know that it's primarily a political issue. When it comes to the assessment of climate political goals, we must reduce fossil energy, and when it comes to blue hydrogen, there will be costs if carbon is to be eliminated from gas. So the development of costs must be considered. So green energies have a competitive advantage that must be developed further. And therefore, it's a difficult political decision in terms of energy policy. And if we see the leaps in the development of renewables, so 50% of renewable electricity in the grid and supply security is 100% insured, and grid operators sometimes even feed in up to 100% green electricity or renewable electricity, and this is not a problem, and it won't be a problem in the future if we continue controlling the grids in a smart manner, if we make the system more flexible, and biogas technologies should also be considered, because 60 gas power plant blocks could be replaced with biogas technologies, but we should see what is already in place and what can be used for biogas, for example, including storage solutions and power-to-X technologies, so this system can be very quickly completely changed over the next 1 or 2 decades. So the question is, do we still have to build a major bridge? And I would say no, individual gas power plant blocks will still be needed. But if the entire infrastructure and the energy supply system, renewables and so forth, and we should also consider decentralized systems, and this can be developed. A counter design when it comes to hydrogen. Methane pyrolysis should be looked at very carefully. 20% of renewable electricity in order to produce hydrogen from electrolysis. And if this can be safely stored, then a lot can be achieved in this way. And I think this has not yet been seen sufficiently as a game changer. So this methane pyrolysis can be a solution, including the storage of C in a large scale, at a large technical scale. So we will need much smaller amounts of renewable electricity. So if I can build this, including decentralized hydrogen grids, so this should be looked at very closely. This is a perfect transition which we have here, because we now have the question regarding the technical and scientific potential of new energies. Methane pyrolysis, Mr. Fischedick, what does the scientist says about this? What would you say, which technologies should be looked at more closely? Basically, this technology should be looked at more closely. Maybe it is lagging behind 10 years, but at the storage end, it generates much less problems, so it is worthwhile looking at this. And the question is, how large are the quantities to be transported in order to achieve the transition to green hydrogen? This should be looked at. So where can it be produced? Where can C be stored? So this does make sense to ask this question. From my perspective, I just mentioned this briefly, one of the most interesting questions: how will an international market develop? Will it be derivatives from hydrogen, synthetic gas, synthetic feedstocks for the chemical industry, input products, or feedstock for the generation sites? So hydrogen could be produced in North Africa or the Middle East. So this would be the means of choice because the distances are relatively short. If you think of Chile, Argentina, and Australia, distances would be too long. So hydrogen would have to be transported in liquid form. And then the question would arise whether this should be converted to other products on site. And the international market is currently emerging, and we should see who, when, and where, and with what means hydrogen can be produced. Mr. Stamatelopoulos, Mrs. Peter, how do you see the companies? What is the position of your companies, of your associations, which are at the very beginning? There is a number of pilot plants and projects which are currently being developed and designed. I look a little bit towards hydrogen and our member companies, which file these applications. VGB bundles these applications and makes sure that they are also financed and implemented. If you mean it this way, how does the company culture change? I think this is a process that will take many years. It started 3 or 4 years ago, and this is now underway, and VGB has decided to support these companies in this direction. Mrs. Peter, what about your association? Yes, of course, companies are always interested in new business models, and this has been the case for many years, that we look around what are the next steps, and especially when it comes to sector coupling. Some companies are already involved, be it in the north, the wind companies, which are involved in projects regarding hydrogen production or other sector coupling options. This is the solar industry, which is interested in coupling with storages at home or also at industrial companies in order to store electricity and use it over a longer period of time rather than feeding it into the grid, or the bio companies of flexibilization, as I already said, which we increasingly need in the energy system. And therefore, we are all very close to it, and we are interested, of course, that politics will set the course, because as we heard it, many jobs and many scientific know-how and technological know-how in particular was destroyed over the last years. So investments must be made in planning security beyond a horizon of a few years. So politics must also think these things, and the innovative industries, which are often further than politics, must be involved and search for possibilities. And this is something what I would wish. The industry is positioned, and it would also assume system responsibility, and it's confident that this can be implemented and achieved at a European level also. Thank you, Mrs. Peter. This is an optimistic view. So slowly we should come to an end of our discussion, and therefore I would like to ask all the participants in this discussion for an overarching aspect. We heard a lot of different factors of global trends of the energy transformation of the energy system, and we could continue discussing for hours, but I would like finally to hear from each of you a statement. We heard a lot. Regulatory framework must be in place, investment conditions must be in place, technologies must be developed further. But what do you think? What is the most important issue that must happen in order to make sure that the energy transition can be achieved, not just in Germany, but also at a global level?
Mr. Bryson, would you like to begin? What is your prior argument? What has to happen?
So, in order for the change to be delivered on the scale that we need it, we do need the policymakers around the world to agree and to align around the certainty of the frameworks that's needed in order for us to be able to invest in the way that we need to going forwards. And I think I think we're at a moment of opportunity. I was at the International Energy Agency recently, and I think Dr. Birrell said that this was the first time he'd ever felt in the energy business around the world that actually leaders, political leaders, were aligned around concepts like hydrogen, for example. So if we can get an approach towards the cross-border certainty that's needed when we're trying to invest as global companies, then I think we have a real chance for change, and that will be a stimulus to enable people to deploy their capital.
Mr. Schmitz, what is a good argument for starting into a glorious energy future? Well, we have to become active, not just put out words. People have to accept what's happening. Common will must have priority over in the individual well-being. We used to say, my freedom goes as long as it doesn't limit the freedom of the others. So if we step back a bit and are ready to shoulder part of the burden, it will work. If everyone just focuses on their individual interest, nothing will happen. Thank you. This is a strong case for joint action. Mr. Fischedick, what is the scientist saying? What has to happen such that we can rebuild our energy system successfully? Well, especially against the background of the situation we're in, I would like to put it into more abstract terms. I think we should try to learn from the corona crisis that the economy is vulnerable, also like the society. Crises have central importance, especially with regard to crises. This applies to the climate crisis. So crisis prevention in this respect is important. That is, everyone, politicians, economy, and the society must take efforts such that the solutions we have are consistently put into practice. That this third decade of the century is the key decade that will decide whether we can achieve the climate goals of Paris. So we need a joint effort of the politicians, society, and the business sector. This is the wish on all of us. Thank you, Mr. Fischedick. Mrs. Peter, what is your wish or prior argument in favor of what has to happen? I would wish to see a fair market, in particular with fair prices, which means carbon prices that maps the challenges of the climate crisis. At the same time, is however a motor of innovation, and that flanked by a new energy market design that also sets the framework such that renewables, clean technologies are in the focus. If this happens, I'm sure that, going back to what Mr. Fischedick said, we will be in a resilient enough position in order to manage the climate crisis, societal crisis of the future. Health, climate protection, environmental protection have to be given priority at the moment. Thank you, Mrs. Peter. Mr. Stamatelopoulos, you are turning 100 today. Not you, but VGB. But when one turns 100, then I think one deserves the honor of the last word and also the largest wish. Thank you very much for these congratulations on our 100th birthday. I personally would also wish us that we have many more approved projects and that projects can move ahead rather than being stopped. It doesn't make sense at all to stop projects of others, because at some point in time one will be affected oneself by this mentality and tactics. And this is what we're currently experiencing. At the moment we see approval periods of good onshore wind projects of up to 60 months. And even though we do have a framework where we have broad political consensus that we want to go into that direction, and for me, this is the most important and first thing that has to be done. Also, the EEG amendment will not add any value if this mindset topic is not resolved successfully. Thank you very much, dear viewers. We have now reached the end of our online celebration of the 100th anniversary of VGB. I hope you have had as much fun as we had here in Essen. On behalf of VGB, I would like to express my warmest thanks to all speakers, those here in the studio, but also you, Mr. Fischedick, Mrs. Peter, who mastered the tech setup very aptly to support us virtually and online. But our most cordial thanks go to you today, dear viewers, because you had such a stimulating contribution to the discussion with all the questions. We could not take all questions into account because of time constraints, but VGB is certainly available to help with that. And here I would like to point you to the recent facts and figures of VGB. They will make a contribution to the discussion. And after this ceremony, from 4:30 on, the membership meeting of VGB will take place. You received a separate invitation to it with access data for the authorized representatives of the membership meeting. So please just stay online. There will be a short break, and from 4:30 on, you will be able to participate in the membership meeting. If you switched on a bit later today for our online event, or if you left it in between, you will find a recording of the whole event. It will be posted online on the VGB website in the next few days, so do stay online and take a look at that. So I would like to wish you a great afternoon and evening from Essen and a good rest of the week. Goodbye, dear viewers, and we do hope that we can meet back in person soon rather than just meeting virtually. So very cordial greetings from the Energy Campus in Essen. Goodbye.